Citizens, I answer you on Mr. Henry's accusation that I am regarded godless, an infidel. Indeed, by many I am called an atheist. I remind you, citizens, of who drafted the Statute of Virginia for religious freedom. That statute that serves as the very foundation of our First Amendment to our Bill of Rights. Mr. Henry would like you to believe that our Constitution exists without a Bill of Rights. He knows well that the Bill of Rights has been proposed for the support of our Constitution, that its ratification cannot proceed without the recognition that our Bill of Rights will be amended to it. He knows well that the first and foremost of those amendments is that to our general freedom, that here for the first time in human history, man is granted indeed the innate liberty in nature to carry his communion with his Maker as he should choose. I remind you, Mr. Henry, when we worked together in our early history in Williamsburg, worked together to support, if you will, those citizens in Massachusetts Bay who were denied their liberty, who had the tea of the East India Company forced upon them, whose alarm was heard in Virginia that they would not suffer taxation without representation, whose efforts resulted in the Boston Tea Party, that in Virginia we worked together in order to promote a day of fasting, humiliation, and prayer on behalf of our sister colony, that we worked together to protect and defend the Baptists and their inherent rights to worship as they choose. This is guaranteed in our Constitution, the guarantee of freedom for religion. Mr. Henry makes the statement that I am womanish in my concerns for the general finance, for the support of our nation, for the paying of our war debt. Citizens, there is but one concern I have, and that is the progression of a deficit of spending, one that General Hamilton led us to believe would be obliterated within but a short time. I remind you, Colonel, of my report on the Northwest Territories suggested in our first Congress of 1784, then seated in Annapolis. I suggested 5 requisites by which our territories might enter our nation as new states. Firstly, every territory to become a state of our union will forever remain a state of our union. Secondly, every territory to becoming a state will have its government in republican forms, as the other states and the federal government. Thirdly, no person holding any hereditary title will be admitted a citizen of the United States. Fourth, that by the year 1800 of the Christian era, there shall no longer be any involuntary servitude in any of the states or the territories annexed to them. But most importantly, Henry, fifth, that we shall have a portion of the national debt apportioned to each and every one of the states, that they might be able to pay directly as they may afford, that we shall not apportion unto any one state what they cannot afford, that we should provide a principle of good government as the direct payment of our national debt, and therefore in that proposition that we should never allow for the formation of a national bank. Indeed, that anyone here I would award with an honorarium if they can find in our Constitution where there is even the suggestion of a national bank. You may remember, Henry, that my report was put up to vote in our nation's Congress in the spring of '84, and it lost. But do you recall it lost by 1 vote? That evening I confided in a correspondence, "This day the heavens have clouded over, and the destinies of unborn millions have been made." Henry is wont to suggest that I reside high upon a lofty tower of highbrow intellectualism. Citizens, I answer that the future of our nation will be found in an educated citizenry. The opportunity for each and every individual to engage their own improvement through an education, a universal system of education to be attended to by the poor as well as the wealthy. And yes, Henry, I know it is contrary to your personal opinion, but a system of education open unto the female as well as the male. No, ignorance is not bliss. An educated citizenry is always a safe and well-defended citizenry. And those gentlemen who have thus far had the privilege simply because their families have the means, how well we know education will always continue to prove the true corrective for the abuses of any authoritative power. And lastly, Henry, no, I will not allow you to escape with your comments about me and the French.
Hear, hear.
Thank you, Doctor. How well we both know.
Indeed. Would you like to comment on my presence as the first ambassador to America?
Indeed,
to
sir,
France?
and my honor to succeed you. I recall when I appeared before His Majesty Louis XVI of France that he was wont to suggest that I was here to replace you, to which I readily answered, no one can replace Dr. Franklin. I am here to succeed him. Now, Mr. Henry, I wish you to know that the French are equally entitled to the principle of revolution. That I remind you, sir, that our American Revolution would have never been successful without the support and the aid of La Belle France. And I hope you will recognize indeed that it is to our nation's great fortune that the French have mastered the art of living so well.
Now, one moment, please. As you know, time is money, and your time is out. Therefore, I have a question, if I may, as the moderator. Were either of you present? At the Continental Congress, the convention itself, and signed the Constitution of the United States? Mr. Henry?
I would not have signed a document that represents such a junction of the sword and the purse as can only invite despotism. No, I was not there, and I would not have signed it. There is no Bill of Rights in the Constitution that is before us to be ratified. I was not there and would not support such a document. And as Mr. Jefferson noted, this document is presented to us now. And he says that we have political ills regarding our Articles of Confederation. Well, this is a curious medicine to bring to what is claimed to be political ills. Did not our Articles of Confederation get us through a revolution, through a war against the mightiest power on earth? And yet, now we need direct taxation? Mr. Jefferson, what will this government take? Will it take 10% of what we earn? Will it take 20%? Could you imagine it taking 40 or 50%? Yes. Now, Mr. Jefferson, is that not the definition of slavery? When our work is taken from us for the benefit of someone else? Now, Mr. Jefferson, I know you are intimate with your slaves. I choose, however, not to be a slave.
I asked a simple question, and for 5 minutes, he asked you, Mr. Jefferson, 10 questions.
Yes, and his further personal attacks upon my character. Dr. Franklin, no, I was not there at the Constitutional Convention to sign my name onto the document. But as you well know, and Mr. Henry does accordingly, I was in constant correspondence with Mr. Madison, whom I consider more than any other to have been the father of our Constitution. When I received that document and accompanying a letter that he wrote me in November 1787, I wrote back to him that I was captivated by this document, the shortest document of its kind in human history, creating a government, mind you, citizens, lest we forget, a government to check its own power, and regarding the greatest power in the 3 branches of that government to be founded in which particularly influential branch? The legislative government. The legislative branch elected directly by whom? The citizenry. Agreeably, Mr. Henry, I said this document lacks one thing, indeed that which all people are entitled to against any government on this globe. I said our Constitution lacks, as you've so well made it known, what? A Bill of Rights. You know, Mr. Madison wrote back to me. He said it is inferred, our rights are inferred in the Constitution. Citizens, I wrote back to Mr. Madison directly, are we to rest upon inference on such an important subject as the rights of man?